Good evening. I'd like to take a specific area of your life where you'd like to achieve an outcome or life isn't the way you want it to be in that specific area, and just write it down. It could be relationships, it could be career, it could be friendships, it could be health, fitness, anything really. Just write it down. And as you write it down, I'd like you to ask yourself the following question: what is missing in my life in that specific area? What is missing? And just write the first thing that comes to mind and hold that forward. We'll come back to that as the seminar unfolds this evening. We're going to move forward. In a traditional approach to problem solving, sometimes the focus is on what's wrong, what needs fixing. And when in that approach, to even think of fixing something without knowing what it is, it would be absurd. From that perspective, we need to gather all the information, and as we gather all the information from the client, we gather it so we can make a diagnosis, so we can categorize the problem, so we can work it out. Now that works beautifully from a mechanical point of view. So let's say, for example, you've got a car. And I'm sure you had a situation in the past where your car's broken down and you take the car to the mechanic, and the mechanic, there's a diagnostic. It could be the fuel injection, it could be the battery, it could be the electrical system, it could be a mechanical fault. The mechanic has the tools to do a diagnostic and then order new parts and so on and so forth. And that works perfectly and beautifully well and wonderfully well from a mechanical point of view. The only thing is, human beings are not mechanical. So in the dilemma, and no doubt you've had that dilemma before, we've all had that, certainly I had, where you've taken your car in for one reason or the other, and the mechanic does a diagnostic and changes parts and so on and so forth. And that works beautifully, wonderfully well from a mechanical point of view. Yet, as we've discussed in previous videos, we're not mechanical human beings. We are not mechanical. So, we can, in adverse to ask the question, what's wrong, ask the client or the patient, what is missing? What is missing? What is missing for this particular person? Including ourselves, of course. What is missing? What may potentially have they been disconnected to? What are they unaware of that is in their experience that they are looking for? And so ask the question, what's missing, as distinct to asking what's wrong, invites us to look within the individual person for that resource, the experience, the promotion, the activity, the emotion they have lost touch with, they have become disconnected from. They might be overlooking, or they might not have yet learnt, which is something we touched on in previous seminars. If you haven't watched the previous tutorials, do watch them in your own time, in your own pace. Yet, you don't necessarily need to watch the previous tutorials to get something out of this tutorial as we go along. So, the question, what is missing, is something that is going to be, and is, right at the very core of the solution approach. And of course, with hypnosis, we're generating experiences. We're generating experience. We have the added benefit to connect or to learn the experience that has been missing for them, so they can generally be okay. Now, what's wrong can potentially imply the therapist. So the question, what's wrong, potentially implies the therapist has some miraculous power of affecting therapeutic change in the patient. And disregards the facts that therapy results from an inner resynthesis of the patient's behavior achieved by the patient, him or herself. So unlike the mechanical point of view where you bring the car in, they do the diagnostic and change the parts and so on and so forth, the patients, the facts the therapy results from an inner resynthesis of the patient's behavior achieved by the patient, him or herself. So the power is not in the therapist. It is in the client or the patient's unknown capacity, certainly unknown to both therapists and clients, what this power of resynthesis is. The locus of the work is inside the client. This is extremely important for any aspiring or existing therapist to understand or coach even. Because one of the biggest stresses for therapists and coaches too, the biggest stresses, well, what do you think? I'll put the question to you. What do you think is one of the biggest stresses for therapists and coaches? What do you think? And write down the first thing that comes to mind. I found in my experience of teaching therapists and coaches around the world for many, many years, having taught many therapists, many aspiring therapists, many coaches around the world for many, many years, the primary stress pretty much across the board for therapists and coaches is the therapist is supposed to have all the answers. The primary responsibility for affecting change. The therapist is supposed to be a know-it-all, know-all somehow, an all-powerful individual who can effectively some way read the person's mind and somehow give instructions to those trillions of cells in the client's brain on how to behave. Now that is near enough an impossible task. And that is the underlying assumption of many, many schools of therapy and to a certain extent some schools of coaching. Now, that potentially causes the therapist a degree of stress, and that can cause stress amongst all us in therapy. We have an impossible ideal to live up to. So what is the alternative, you might ask? What is the alternative, Jim? What do you suggest to that ideal? Well, the beginning of an alternative, a more adequate point of view, the basic idea that the power is not in the therapist. The power is not in the therapist having a miraculous power for affecting therapeutic changes. In adverse to that, therapy results from the inner resynthesis of the patient's behavior achieved by the patient, him or herself. So, the question of what's missing is something that is going to be right at the very core of the solution-focused approach. And of course, it's wonderful that hypnosis, we're generating experiences, options and alternatives for the patients, for the clients. We have the added benefit to be able to connect or to learn the experience that has been missing for them. So I invite you to invite yourself and extend the capacity of what you do professionally and ask the question, what is missing? Obviously work on the realms of your responsibility and take in consideration ethical responsibilities. I'm not suggesting, if you're not a therapist, to go out there and use this protocol. I'm not suggesting if you are a therapist to go out there and use this protocol. It's just something to bear in mind and to consider in adverse to focusing on what is wrong and implying there is anything wrong. And what we suggested earlier was beautifully in the way of mechanical fault, and we used the example of the car, and the car breaks down and you bring the car to a mechanic and they do a diagnostic, and after doing diagnostic they then can go away, or the parts, and get to work, and that works beautifully in that environment. Yet, from a mechanical point of view, human beings, we're not mechanical. So, in adverse to focusing on what is wrong, we can ask the question, what is missing? So, going back to what I earlier said before, what is missing, and you can reflect and focus, and through this reflection and through creating your own experiences and reflecting and your own experiential learning, we can embed the learning and certainly do watch this seminar, other seminars we've done in the series, as often as you feel necessary, and take away what's right for you. So asking the question, what is missing? Asking that question, and by doing that, we can then invite the person or ourselves to search for that resource, that experience, that action, that promotion, that emotion, that activity that they may have lost touch with or have become disconnected from, or they may be overlooking or not have yet learned. So any questions, comments or feedback, do email me. Our next seminar will be on the language of hypnosis, so do tune in for that one. This one will be available again, and we'll put it on our social media, so do log in and watch it as often as you feel necessary, and take away what you will from the seminar. Thanks again, have a fantastic evening. Until next time, stay awesome.